Sorry about that. Hit the wrong button. Okay, so what I was saying was, so I didn't get any work done, even though I had like a 3-hour span at the end of that day. It wasn't very productive because it was a back-to-back going back and forth. And so when you're scheduling your days, when you think about a meeting, think about attending a meeting, and then what work will that meeting produce afterwards. So for every hour meeting that I have, I probably have about 2 hours of work attached to that meeting for follow-up. And if I don't schedule some time to look at that material, look at that work for follow-up, things begin to drop, and I don't get to accomplish the goals that I've set that I need to accomplish, right? Because you have to plan for what you want to produce, okay? So we can't spend all of our days in meetings all day and then expect to be productive because we haven't scheduled time to be productive. So as you're looking at your time, what I read this, I can't remember where I read it, but there's a tool they use to talk about how you have time blocks for doing your work. So as you're doing your work, what you're doing is you're blocking off 45-minute work zones or work time. And so that's an optimal amount of time. And then you step away from your work for about 15 minutes and then come back. And when you do that, you're what they say is you're more productive because you've given yourself a targeted amount of time to do that particular work or assignment. You tend to produce exactly what you want to produce in that time block. Versus my way, a lot of times my way is a lot of multitasking, so I'm working on several things at one time. I do not produce as effectively when I do that. So when I'm trying to work on more than one thing at a time, what happens is that I get distracted by the email that comes through, and I quickly answer the email, and it takes me away from finishing the writing for the curriculum or whatever it is I have to do. There is something on my leg, sorry. And so what you begin to do is it looks like you're being really, really busy because you're carrying on and taking care of a whole lot of things, but you're really not being as productive. And so you make sure that when you block off time for a specific project or to do a particular work, you want to make sure that you get that work done, right? And so as you're doing that, you'll begin to see that your productivity is going to be higher and you're going to yield more increase and you're going to complete more projects, right? But you have to plan for that to happen. It doesn't just like osmosis drop down and just happen that way. And so those are like tips that I use in planning my schedule. Now, remember I said last week, hey, good morning. Last week I shared that you always want to write down your schedule. You want to know where you need to be, what the assignment is, what work you're going to do, all of those things. So you don't leave it to chance that you'll remember that I have to do X, Y, and Z and have these pieces in place. You always want to make sure that you write down where you're going to be in your plan. The other reason for that is, say you have a new client and you want to know, you want to spend about an hour and a half time with them to work on getting them acclimated and what the goals are. And then you have a doctor's appointment for your kids that you scheduled 3 months ago. If you haven't written all of those things in, what happens is you'll have overlap, and then you'll get to that day and like, oh my God, I got to cancel with my new client because I forgot to write it down on my schedule for this appointment. And so they call and say, hey, we're just reminding you have an appointment tomorrow. You're like, oh crap, I forgot about this appointment. And so the outcome of that is that your new client is going to think, man, they're flaky. We scheduled this and they have to cancel. And I was really looking forward to it. I need to meet this timeline, this goal, and it's not going to be met because they canceled on me, right? So that's a bad impression. But if you're keeping track of your time and where you need to be in your schedule, then you know in advance, oh, that day is not going to work, so we wouldn't schedule that day. And then you would schedule it out a different day. And so those are just little tips that you can use as you're planning out your day, managing your time, right? Because time, we don't get more hours in a day. But what we do is we can handle our days more effectively, and so we can yield more outcomes and positive outcomes as we go through. Thank you. Some of this I learned from you, DeAndrea. And so as you're going through your day to day, what I want you to do is go back, revisit your schedule that you created, because you should have created a schedule. I had a couple of people message me about questions that they had from last week's scope. And so you should have created your schedule. You should have written down what your schedule is. So now go back and revisit it and look at your blocks of time. Have you scheduled your meetings back to back so that you're not going to get all of those pieces done because there's too much overlap? And have you scheduled downtime, right? Because you cannot be going in and out of meetings, and not be affected by that. So probably next week we'll look at that next week. So next week on Thursday we'll talk about scheduling in self-care. That's like important, like whatever your self-care is. My self-care is sitting in a quiet coffee shop or Starbucks and going to the bookstore and having time to browse is part of my self-care. Going to get my nails done and sitting in the pedicure chair and chilling. Reading a nothing book or reading a magazine is self-care for me. So next week we'll talk about scheduling self-care and how to squeeze in moments. There's a book I'll talk about living in the margins, and so I'll talk about that book next week. All right. So this is Kelly Ramsey with Developing People, and again, we help you to discover the greatness that's within you, develop it, and then launch it to fruition. So have an awesome day. Sorry, it's in two parts because I hit the wrong button as I was trying to move around. So have a great day, and I will see you on tomorrow on Friday, Fantabulous Friday. And I hope you plan accordingly and get lots of things accomplished today. All right, bye-bye.